Welcome back, everybody, to your creativity. We have a very special guest today. He's one of my podcasting heroes. He's the one that inspired me to try podcasting back in the day a few times, and I failed horribly. But I think I've got it now. I'm nearly 100 episodes, so everybody, welcome Cliff Ravenscraft.
Well, Dylan, thank you so much for having me here. I'm delighted.
Yeah, I became aware of you back in the day when Lost was on TV with the weekly Lost podcast of yours. What inspired you to start that?
Well, I was pretty much a early adopter of technology, always excited about the new things that you can do online with computers and just tech in general. So I had already discovered podcast as a listener, and I had a blog at the time that I had been doing since 1996 and not had much luck of getting a worldwide audience that was really interested in what I said. I think I had about 150, 200 people who were reading my blog on a pretty consistent basis. But I had left some audio feedback for one of the podcasts devoted to the Lost TV show, if you will.
Right.
And when I left some audio feedback, it was a 3-minute audio clip that summarized a blog post that I wrote about my theory about this TV show Lost. And they played my audio feedback in that podcast, which had a worldwide audience in the tens of thousands. And I started getting about over 1,000 views per day, not per month, but per day on my website.
That's great.
Entertainment Weekly, or EW.com, did an article based upon my theory, and I began to get a lot of requests from people saying, hey, why don't you create your own podcast? I mean, gosh, I loved hearing just the 3 minutes that you did on that show. I think you'd be great to have your own podcast. So that's what got me excited.
And then it evolved into something so much bigger, because at the time you were doing insurance and doing fairly well. And eventually you made a jump to do the podcasting full time. Tell us about that journey a little bit.
Yeah, so I started podcasting, like I said, it was just a hobby for me. It was just playing around. Didn't have any intention of trying to create any sort of business or anything. But as a result of creating that podcast, I had people starting to ask myself questions related to the things that I was talking about. So I did the Lost podcast with my wife, Stephanie, and with the themes of each of the episodes that we were discussing, they had topics like matter of fact, titles of episodes were All Good Cowboys Have Daddy Issues, which, of course, who doesn't have occasional stories related to daddy issues? And we shared our own personal experiences and how we related to what was being told in the characters of the story. There was another episode titled Tabula Rasa, which is the theme of starting over with a clean slate. You know, these people had some past experiences in life that might have, quote unquote, determined what their future was. But on the island, nobody knew what their past was, so they could, quote unquote, start over with a clean slate. So, just talking about different things like that and how we relate to that and the ideas, people began to email me and ask me all sorts of questions like, man, I listened to the way you and your wife talk. Tell me, how did you guys get to the place where you have this openness in the way that you communicate with one another? How did you learn to communicate so effectively in your marriage? You talked about such and such when it comes to how you handle situations with your kids. Here's a situation that I have. How would you handle that? We talked about financial stuff. People said, man, you mean to tell me that you and your wife are debt free? How on earth did you ever accomplish that? So people were coming to me all the time asking me for advice and wisdom on various aspects and areas of their lives. And one thing that you haven't mentioned is I did have insurance as a career. I was working in my mom and dad's family. It was a family-run insurance agency that started by my grandfather in 1937. And I was an insurance agent, but on the side, going outside of that, I was actually an associate pastor in a small Christian church as well. And so I had a heart for serving people and having a powerful and positive impact in people's lives. And what I realized is that, oh my gosh, I have the opportunity to have ongoing, authentic, genuine, real relationships and conversations with people about the things that matter most in their lives. Where even in my traditional ministry experience for years, so much of that seemed surface level. I mean, this was like, wow, this is in my heart. This is more means more to me than my career as an insurance agent. This means more to me than my role, if you will, the official capacity in which I was involved in the church. It's like this. I began to ask myself, what would life look like if I could do this for a living instead? Back in those days, I didn't think or dream that it would be possible to get paid just to have encouraging conversations with people. So I said, well, how could I make it possible so that I could actually free up my time to create as much content as I want, so that I could spend as much time engaging with people via email, so that I could engage in conversation and create community around the different various topics for which I podcasted about. And one thing came to my mind. I could pay for that by becoming known as a podcast coach and consultant. I can teach people how I create podcasts. Before I left my career as an insurance agent, I had been podcasting for 2 years at that point. And during those first 2 years of podcasting, I had already started over 10 different podcasts, and I had already produced well over 1,000 podcast episodes. I mean, I started in December 2005. It's currently April 2020. And so far, I've produced over 35 different podcast shows and well over 5,000 podcast episodes at this point. So I have a lot of experience in launching different podcast shows, creating content, getting over all of the technical hurdles and issues. And so what allowed me to leave my career as an insurance agent was to go ahead and teach people how to podcast and get paid to do that.
And your mic has the name of that consulting podcast, Answer Man. I always love that name, and that's what you were. You were a great resource, and still are a great resource to many podcasters. A couple of big podcasters here in Salt Lake that have seen you in person just rave about you. Chris Hollyfield, he has the I Am Salt Lake podcast, and he's been doing it for years. He's got over 400 shows. And then Richie T. Stedman, he was a radio producer here in town, and he just crossed 400 with his religion podcast, Cultural podcast. So I just wanted to mention them because they thought so highly of you when they've seen you in person at Podcast Movement. Speaking of events, we haven't had many lately. What are some of the past events that you've really enjoyed going to and putting together?
Events that I've enjoyed going to back in the day, the old Blog World events, New Media Expo were always nice. I remember my very first one of those was in New York City. I think that was 2010. June of 2010 was an incredible event. And I went to all of the Blog World New Media Expos after that, all the way until the final one that they had. And then I've been to every social media marketing world event that they've had so far. I've actually had the privilege of speaking at all of those. It's hosted by my friend Michael Stelzner from socialmediaexaminer.com. I attended and spoke at all of the platform conferences by Michael Hyatt. So he wrote a book called Platform: Getting Noticed in a Noisy World. It was a New York Times best-selling book, and he created that event related to that. So I enjoyed going to all of those. And then Tony Robbins, I think Unleash the Power Within is my favorite event of all events that I've ever attended, just as an attendee. And I've been to that twice. I took my wife down to Dallas, Texas in June 2016. And then I think it was in the summer of 2017, I took my oldest daughter and my son and one of my best friends went to Chicago for Unleash the Power Within.
Awesome. And then recently you've started throwing your own events. Tell us about that. Freeing the Dream, I believe.
Yeah,
Free the Dream.
Yeah, Free the Dream conference. So when I left Unleash the Power Within by Tony Robbins in June of 2016, I left there saying, oh my gosh, I want to create an event like this that has this focus on mindset. See, one of the things that I learned from Tony Robbins is that success in any area of life is 20% skill, strategy, technique, or knowing how to do something. And 80% of success is the mindset, getting yourself to follow through and do the things you already know you ought to do. And mindset is where most people fail. They get stuck in a pattern of emotional responses to life, and they don't know how to manage that. And as a result of that, they get stuck. Or if they move forward and get some momentum, they usually self-sabotage themselves because of what Gay Hendricks calls an upper limit challenge. They've got some programmed beliefs that they've been carrying around their entire life that holds them back to experiencing life in a limited way. And so I'm like, man, I want to help people understand these principles and understand these philosophies. And so I came out of that event and I was like, man, you know what? I want to spend the next 30 years of my life doing what Tony Robbins has done for the past 30 years of his life. And one of the things that I wanted to do was to create an event. So Free the Dream Conference was my version of his Unleash the Power Within. In fact, I just became a massive student of all the things that Tony Robbins teaches. I spent thousands of hours over the next several years studying all of his courses, all of his materials, and then putting that together and combining it with all sorts of other things like The Big Leap and by Gay Hendricks, Psycho-Cybernetics by Dr. Maxwell Maltz, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, Earl Nightingale's The Strangest Secret, all of these other personal and professional development books and materials and resources and courses, and not to mention my own experiences in life. And I realized, wow, I could develop an entire community of people who would want to hear these same mindset techniques, strategies, tools, and tips and stuff like that, but they would love to hear it from my perspective, using my stories, my experiences with it. And I'm able to reach an audience of people who, when I tell them, you need to go to check out this thing from Tony Robbins, you need to, Tony Robbins is great. They're like, Cliff, I really appreciate that, but unfortunately, I'm never going to listen to Tony Robbins for X number of reasons. Some people really don't like his language. Sometimes he uses a lot of cursing in the things that he does. Some of the stories that he tells might be a little bit more on the offensive end for some people on a certain area. Some people who are of very deep faith may not like the fact that he uses some of the more new age language sometimes versus the very orthodox Christian language or whatever. So there's just a number of reasons why some people may not actually resonate with how Tony Robbins teaches, but man, what he teaches would transform their lives if they could just get over that. And so um, I found, for me, when I first started thinking about creating my own event, it's like, man, why would anybody come to my event when they could just go to Unleash the Power Within? And then it just became obvious. There's people out there that not in a million years would they go to Unleash the Power Within, but they would come to some of those people would come to my event. And so that's what Free the Dream was. I started that in September 2018. My wife and I had an incredible experience our first year. 87 people from around the world. So we actually had people from Germany, France, Australia, and all over the United States and Canada. And then we did it again, Free the Dream 2019 last year, had 117 people the second year. Again, international audience. We had people, last year was from Germany, Australia. I can't think if there was I think there was one other country. But anyway, and then all over the United States and Canada again. And then we were scheduled to have Free the Dream 2020 this year, but of course we're currently in the midst and I guess maybe the early stages of the new normal that is brought about by the coronavirus COVID-19. And so there are no conferences in person that are happening. So we made the decision to shut down Free the Dream for the time period, for the time being, which is perfectly fine for us. It's not what I was hinging all of my income upon or anything like that. But yeah, that's what Free the Dream was.
And are past conferences available for people to watch, or is it kind of there and done?
It's they're available if people desperately want it. It's available. Matter of fact, I can tell you, just go to mindsetanswerman.com/free, and that way you can get a feel for yourself whether or not it would be something you're even interested in. You can go at mindsetanswerman.com/free. There's a 90-second video clip, and if that 90-second video clip doesn't hook you, then don't even worry about it. However, my guess is that if you go to mindsetanswerman.com/free and you watch that 90-second video clip, you'd love to watch the entire opening keynote address that I did for Free the Dream, which is available for free if in exchange for your email address. And of course, I think if you go in there, there may be a link at the end of the free video that you could get access to the online course. I do not market it right now, simply because it's not my focus at this time in this
Right.
season of my life. But it is available, and if anybody desperately wants it and you can't figure out how to get to it after you watch the free video, just email me, cliff@cliffravenscraft.com. I'll send you a link where you can buy it.
Okay. And recently I started a video series where I'm interviewing past guests about how they're dealing with the quarantined. I call it quarantined creativity. Well, and you've been working at home for years and close with your family that way. How are things affecting you with the shut-in virus stuff?
They my There is a little bit of change for me, but my life almost has been completely untouched by the coronavirus personally. The type of business that I have has been online. I've been working from home since January 2008, so that's no different for me. My wife has been a stay-at-home mom since our oldest child was, or since, well, let's put it this way, for well over 18 to 20 years. So we've both been at home all the time. Our oldest daughter, who is in college, did come home from her dorm, and so she's back at home, but which is kind of nice. So it's actually one way that's been a change, but it's kind of nice to have her under the roof again with us. Um, yeah, and my business has been virtual, so I do coaching and mastermind groups, and that's what I've been focused on over the past 2 years. I no longer teach people how to create podcasts anymore. I did that for over a decade, and 2 years ago, I read the book The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks and decided I never want to teach somebody how to podcast again. And I never want to answer questions like what cable do I need, what mixer should I have, how do I get this buzzing sound out of my podcast. Those things just I after you help a I've helped over 40,000 people launch a podcast in about 12 years, and I'm done with that part of my life. So
Well,
I made a transition that about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, that I want to just do mindset coaching. And I created two different mastermind groups called the Next Level Mastermind. I have an AM, one group that meets in the morning, one group that meets in the evening, and we meet once a week. And I have 3 to 5 one-on-one coaching clients that and my pricing is pretty much high on the very high end of things. So I basically meet with people via Zoom calls, and everybody's talking about Zoom these days. I've been using Zoom for the last several years of my life anyway. So the only thing that's changed for me is I used to go to the gym every single day, 6 days a week minimum, and work out at Planet Fitness or some other local gym. And that's really the biggest thing that I miss, is that I don't go to the gym anymore. But I have a gym in my house, so I can work out here. And if the weather's nice enough, I'll go out for a 5 mile walk, or I'll get on my bike and go for a 10, 15, 20, 30, or 50 mile ride.
that's another thing I wanted to touch upon was your weight loss, because back in the day, you were a much larger gentleman, and now you're a slim hunk. What was that journey like?
Well, it was it's for me. I've always been interested in helping people pursue the life for which they were created. So very faith-based oriented message, right?
Right.
And I guess for some reason I never really gave myself much thought. I growing up as a young adult, I was told that, these are your genetics that you've been dealt with, and this is just how you are. And so I never really considered my weight all that much. When I left my day job as an insurance agent and started working for myself that first year, there was so much I didn't know. I'd spent an entire lifetime working as an employee. So when I became full-time self-employed, I struggled that first year. In fact, if you go to mindsetanswerman.com/free, you'll understand just how bad we suffered. It was a lot, but I made it through that year, and just barely came out alive, and that's not an exaggeration. After my first year, I spent 2 weeks in the hospital where I almost died as a result of just being physically exhausted, physically ill, and just destroying my body internally due to stress, anxiety, worry, fear, doubt, and everything else. Now, don't get me wrong, it was still the most fulfilling year of my life. I'd never had so much joy over doing what I felt most called to do in this world. And I was learning and I was growing. But everything that I did, all of my time, effort, and energy went into figuring out business, figuring out products, sales, marketing, all of this stuff. And I paid no attention to the fact that I'm working around the clock and I have no physical activity and I eat crap all day, every day. So over time, I'm sitting here becoming more and more. After that first year, I started to really get involved in personal and professional development. I talked about the Tony Robbins stuff from 2016, but way before I really got into the Tony Robbins stuff, I was already into this Earl Nightingale, the Strangest Secret, and Napoleon Hill, which is Think and Grow Rich, and Rabbi Daniel Lapin, who wrote the book Thou Shalt Prosper. Dan Miller, who wrote the book 48 Days to the Work You Love, The 4-Hour Work Week by Timothy Ferriss, T. Harv Eker's The Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. I mean, I could go on and on and on. All of these books that I was reading that was radically transforming my mindset and the way that I think about approaching success in life. And as I was breaking through to new levels of success financially, my income was just going through the roof. So much so that I built my podcast coaching and consulting business to over $500,000 a year business. And financially, it was great. However, that was after I got out of the hospital. That's when things went on the major upswing. But during that same period of time, I was struggling with an up and down battle in my health and fitness journey. I'd take some strides, and I'd have 6 or 8 or 9 months where I would work out pretty consistently, eat pretty healthy, lose a lot of weight. Then I'd gain it all back, and I'd get sick and I'd be out of it, and I'd break my routine, and then I'd go back to my old lifestyle. And, I did that for years, up and down, up and down, up and down. In fact, I spoke at I think there were 5, maybe 6 different sessions of Michael Hyatt's platform conference. So he did it twice a year for a couple of years. And then anyway, so I spoke at all of those. And so there were times when I got on stage and I weighed almost 300 pounds. And there were times when I got on stage where I weighed closer to 200 pounds. And it's crazy. So the events were like 8 months apart from each other. And 8 months earlier, I might have been 212. And then here I am now this time, and I'm, 285. Or 270.
Yeah.
And it was crazy. And so November 2014, Ken Davis, who was Michael Hyatt's business partner at the time, he came to me and says, Cliff, I'd love to offer you something. I'd love to be your mentor. Now, Ken Davis is a Christian comedian. You could look him up. He's very well known. And he also had over 30 years of experience as training people how to do professional public speaking. And that was, for me, of course, I told you I was getting ready to pursue this idea of major speaking. I'd been speaking at Michael's event. I wanted to eventually host my own conferences and all these other things. So I'm thinking, this is cool. He's going to mentor me in public speaking. That would be incredible to be mentored. But what he was talking about, he says, Cliff, I'd like to mentor you in the area of health and fitness. And then he told me about his journey. And At the time, he was like 69 years old. And that morning, we were in Colorado, so they're high elevation. And that morning, as a 69-year-old man, he had just ran 3.5 miles up a mountain and then back down. And that at 69
Wow.
years old. And here I was, I walked up the steps and thought I was going to have a heart attack as a result of elevation sickness. So I took him up on the offer. He says, "Listen, if you take me up on this offer, I'm going to ask you to make a couple of commitments. Number one, I want you to read my book called Fully Alive, so you know my entire story and what motivates me and what inspires me. The second commitment that I'll have you make is I want you to read a book called Younger Next Year. This is a book that's going to tell you about some of the biological processes of exercise and working out and why it's essential that you do this. That book will also talk about the next thing, which is you'll make a commitment to working out 6 days a week, every week, for the rest of your life." And then there was one other commitment. He said, in 6 months from now, in my hometown, there is going to be a triathlon in Nashville, Tennessee, and I want you to complete this triathlon with me. Now, when he's asking me this, I'm at my heaviest. I'm almost 300 pounds. And 6 months from then, I'm supposed to do a triathlon with him. And, the thing is I had already had this up and down journey. I'd already been fed up with everything. And I'm just like, man, what am I going to get this figured out? When am I going to figure this out? And so this seemed to me like he offered this at the perfect time. And what really was appealing to me is out of all of those things, there was one phrase: for the rest of your life. And I like to put things out there. I'm the type of person, I like to make a commitment and do things that most people would think is impossible. And then just prove to them that what you think is impossible is definitely possible. So it's working out 6 days a week, every week for the rest of my life. That's really what got me excited. And then when I read the book Younger Next Year, and I understood what happens after 20 minutes of physical activity with your heart rate elevated to a minimum of 65% of your maximum heart rate, your heart rate, all of a sudden it's like, you mean I could go and cure my body of cancer? I can improve my immune system, and I could stop having bronchitis and upper respiratory infections twice a year. You mean I could literally change the physical makeup of the inside of my body? And by the way, what I'm talking about, I used to experience, the doctor diagnosed me with chronic bronchitis, saying that you're just gonna, this is something you've had this twice a year, every year, sometimes more. So I spent about 5 months out of the year unable to do this. 5 months out of the year, I could never breathe without coughing, without wheezing, without like that. I mean, literally 5 months out of the year on average. And this was November 2014. So how many years? That's over 5 years ago, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for the past 5 years, I've had one upper respiratory infection, and it required no medication. When I actually got the upper respiratory infection, I went to the gym, and I literally kicked it out of my system. I said, listen, I ain't nobody got time for upper respiratory infection. I went to the gym, and I had so much sweat. I blowing my nose like crazy and all this stuff and everything. And I just went to the gym and I said, listen, I'm going to kill this thing with these cytokines. I'm changing the blood chemistry inside. And I did that for 2 or 3 days straight, completely eliminated. I've gone over 5 years without any physical illness whatsoever.
That's amazing. So tell us more about past the 20 minutes thing is when your body starts, you kind of just touched on it.
Yeah, they're called
It's a workout.
cytokines. So cytokines. Okay. So the book talks about the fact that there are many different cytokines, but the book Younger Next Year, I don't know the names of the authors. There are 2 authors though. So it's a book called Younger Next Year, and you'll see 2 different authors. that are cited as the authors of the book. One's a patient and one's a doctor, and they talk about this journey together. Anyway, cytokines are running through your blood at all times. Now, there are multiple different cytokines, but the book basically breaks it down to two different cytokines. He calls one he labels one set a C6 and one is a C12. And it's been too long since I've read the books to know which one's the good and which one's the bad. But here's what happens. At normal homeostasis throughout your life right now, uh, if you're over the age of 30 and you're not at an elevated heart rate, then your body, your bloodstream, your blood is pumping through every single organ, every cell of your body is getting blood to it. And inside of that blood are the negative or the bad cytokines. And that the bad cytokines are literally breaking down and destroying certain areas or cells within your body. So it's actually taking, I mean, and by the way, some organs require this. And one of the things that I remember reading in the book, there's at least one organ in your body, or there's one muscle in your body that is actually destroyed and made completely new. And gosh, it's been too long. I think every year. Like every year, what is currently in your body right now it's not the same thing that was there last year. It's been torn down and remade again. So, but what's going on is as we're, especially after the age of 30, certainly after the age of 40, and definitely it's big time serious issues after the age of 50. These cytokines, if you are just by normal, are going through and just destroying you, tearing you apart, basically degrading your body down to nothing. However, what happens is if you get into an aerobic exercise, a cardiovascular workout, and you figure out what your maximum heart rate is, and you elevate your heart rate in physical activity for a minimum of 20 minutes at 65% or higher of your maximum heart rate, then what happens is it's right about that time when you begin to really get on a good sweat, or you start, once you get there, your blood chemistry changes. You go from the bad cytokines to now you've flipped a switch, and now you have the good cytokines. So I can't remember, like, again, I don't know if it's the C10s go to the C6s or the C6s go to the C10s or the C12s. It's been too many years since I read the book. But I do know this. The way that I envision this, I visualize this in my mind. When I get on a piece of cardiovascular equipment, or when I go out for a bike ride, and my heart rate gets up to, let's just say, 121 or 125 beats per minute or more for me, then all of a sudden I know that after 20 minutes, it's like injecting myself with nanobots, like hundreds of thousands of nanobots that are programmed to go in and fix areas of my body that are actually improving my immune system, that actually go in and say, oh my gosh, there's cancer cells here. Let's eliminate that and get it out of the body. That is what I'm doing every day, 6 days a week, and have been doing for over 5 years. And it's ironically, after it was about a year and a half or 2 years of this, I had a medical doctor that I interviewed for one of my podcasts several years ago. And he had been following my journey, and I asked him some questions and stuff like that. And one of the things he says, Cliff, did you know that the average person has cancer at least 2 or 3 times within their lifetime, and it's never diagnosed and is never a problem? The chances are the average person may have cancerous cells in their body right now, and it doesn't matter because their immune system will find it, see it, eliminate it, unless you have a damaged immune system from all of the bad cytokines that are consistently working against you. And so all of a sudden, once I learned that this is happening inside of my body, I'm like, oh my gosh, Working out isn't a struggle. It's not a daily grind. Working out is like, oh my gosh, this is a gift for me. This is a gift to my body. I get to
Yeah.
actually have the I get to actually become younger. And here's what I will tell you. If anybody wants to, you can go to mindset or go to cliffravenscraft.com or mindsetanswerman.com. Either one. It's the same website. Then click on work with me. And on my work with me page, there's a little bit of a bio, and one of those things that says I've worked out 6 days a week every week for the rest of my life, lost over 100 pounds. And there's a little link that says click here to see before and after photos. And just look at those. There's a bunch of photos of me when I weighed almost 300 pounds, and there's photos of what I look like today. And I can tell you right now, the photos of the before are from like 5, 10 years from 10 years ago. I look about 20 years younger today than I did
Yeah.
then.
I was curious about that 20 minutes because that's where I kind of hit my limit. So now that I know and understand that's very, very helpful. Let's see what I have next. Couple of our standard questions. Who inspires you?
Who inspires me? Let's see here. I would say Tony Robbins definitely inspires me. Michael Hyatt inspires me. Dan Miller inspires me. Those are the people's names that I've already mentioned. I'd say those are the people who inspire me the most pretty consistently.
That's great. What situation, when you're being creative and trying to figure things out, what situations are best for that? Like consulting with Stephanie, or digging into research, or what helps you build that stuff out?
I'm not. Can you rephrase the question in a different way? Because I'm not sure.
Well, the standard question I have: what situations are most creative for you? So is it like
Okay.
working with Stephanie and that kind
So,
of stuff?
so here's what I'm going to say to that question is I feel like there's no situation where I'm not creative. So I'm creative 24/7 nonstop. I have a very strong belief that I was created by a creator and I was created in the image of a creator, and therefore I've been given the gift of creation. So I believe that I'm creating all day every day without ceasing. So I'm always creative. There's not a moment of my life that I'm not creative. In fact, here's what I will tell you. Back in the days when, let's just say before I developed some radical shifts in the way that I think and see the world, and just I have this incredible way of just going after the things that I want in life. And so I get to create a lot of positive things. But the thing is, before, back in the days when, remember I told you I really struggled the first year of my business. I had a lot of fear, anxiety, overwhelm, and all this other stuff. And I'd get really upset and angry when my website would go down for an hour. And I'm like, for that hour, my life seems to be overwhelming and blah, blah, blah. The thing is I was extremely creative during that time. The thing is, though, is in my mind, what I'm doing is I'm creating a vision. I was literally in that in let's just take an example. Back in the day when I just launched a brand new product, I just sent out a bunch of messaging and podcast episodes. Go here, buy this, and then my website's down for an entire hour, right? And so, excuse me, now I'm so upset. I'm so angry. I'm so frustrated. And the reason why I'm so frustrated is because I'm using my creativity too much. What I've done is it's kind of like I'm a script writer for a movie. I'm writing a script and I'm writing a horror story. And so what I've done is I'm telling myself, I'm creating this vision. Oh my gosh, this is the end of the world. All of that hard work has gone to nothing. I'm going to be homeless. My kids we're going to lose our house. We're going to be in massive amounts of debt. This is the end of the world. My life is over, blah, blah, blah. Woe is me. And so I was being creative. I was being extremely creative with my imagination. So so whether the thing for me, when am I most creative? There's not a time that I'm not creative. So the question for me is, what am I doing with my gift of creativity? Am I using it for good, or am I using it for harm? And so my desire is to always be using my creativity for good, to serve me, to serve my family, to serve my community, to serve my clients, to serve my friends, to serve the world as a whole.
That's probably the best answer I've heard to that question. That was great. That's awesome. Then even in those dark times, your creativity was boiling that far up. I've got a series of bonus questions, and I guess we kind of touched on this one. What does creativity mean to you? I think you pretty much answered that.
Well,
Um,
I'd like to explain.
oh,
I'd like to.
oh
I'd
yeah,
love the
yeah, go
chance
for
to
it.
answer that one. I love. What does creativity mean for me? So creativity means to create, and creating means taking something that does not exist and bringing it into existence. And all we have to do, everything, wherever you go, my favorite Steve Jobs quote was a 1984 interview that wasn't released until, I never saw it until after he died. But he was sitting in this office and he says, you know what? He goes, one day I looked out over, I was in a high rise apartment. I looked out over the city and I saw all of these big, huge, multi-million dollar, $100 million skyscrapers. I looked out at everything that existed and it says, man, what's exciting to me is that all of those things that exist that I am seeing was one day nothing more than a thought in the mind of someone else who was no smarter than I.
That's awesome. Wow, I like that. The next bonus question is, who's your favorite Muppet?
I don't have a favorite Muppet.
You love them all, or you're just not a Muppet guy?
Just not a Muppet guy. I think if I had to remember, I think there's Fozzie and Kermit and Miss Piggy, Fonzo. I remember being somewhat mildly intrigued and entertained by them as a kid, but I couldn't describe any of them as a favorite. I think they're all a little basic for my tastes today.
All right. It's just a fun question I came up with. In the movie of your life, who would you like to play you?
Me.
Uh, Explain that a little bit.
Why anybody
Why,
else?
wait, yeah.
Why not me? I would love to be in a movie, and I'd love to play the role of me because it's an exciting role, and I think that I could probably do that that role justice more than anybody else.
Well, I think it would be you've inspired so much, you've overcome so much, and you're so successful. I think it would be great. Now, you started the Lost podcast, so you're big into geeky stuff and like that. What are some of the things you're enjoying right now?
Oh gosh, so much. I just finished studying probably about 60 hours worth of study of clinical hypnotherapy. A friend of mine I met is a hypnotherapist, and he sent me this out of print book called The Wizard Within, which is the Krasner method of clinical hypnotherapy. And I read this entire book. I you can see it here. I've got highlighted pages. I've pretty much highlighted more than 30% of the entire book. So I absolutely love this. And then I went into a bunch of other books about hypnotherapy. And what I love about hypnotherapy is hypnosis. I completely misunderstood what hypnosis was just based upon a couple of experiences, or actually one real experience of going to a comedy club when I was in college. And there was this comedian that did a stage act of hypnotherapy and stuff like that. And I still see some stuff like that on YouTube and things like where they make the audience, or make somebody member of a volunteer from the audience, they make them cluck like a chicken, do embarrassing things. And then they say, they're like, I didn't know I did that. And just to learn all of the stuff behind the scenes, the fact that all of those people who say they don't remember doing all that stuff, they absolutely do remember doing those things. And just dispelling all of the myths related to hypnotherapy. And then what's really exciting to me is to learn that actually, when you consider if you really understand what a trance state is, here's another one. I realized that the average human is in a trance state a minimum of 2 to 5 times per day, every single day. Absolutely, completely hypnotized in a trance. And if anybody's ever wondered, well, I don't know that I've ever been in a trance state. Yes, you have. So have you ever driven to work the same way every single day, but then one day you're actually not going to work, but you're meant to go somewhere else, and you find yourself actually getting on the turning left on to get on the expressway because that's what you always do? You are in a trance state. Have you ever left your house, gone somewhere that's, let's just say 30, 45 minutes or even an hour away, and by the time you get there, you can't actually once recall 30 or 40% of the decisions you made on the way there, the things that you passed, the things that were on the side of the road? You were hypnotized. You were in a trance state. And so when you learn that this isn't some mysterious thing that's only for a select few mind manipulators, but you realize that you can understand how hypnosis works, how a trance state works, what the critical cortex and the prefrontal lobe does, and how if you can get yourself into a trance state and give yourself auto suggestions, how you can actually use your auto servo mechanism talked about in Dr. Maxwell Maltz's book Psycho-Cybernetics. You can actually get yourself to do things you never dreamed possible before. So that's just one little geeky thing that I've gotten into lately.
Very cool. Wow, that's awesome. Kind of reprogramming yourself a little bit.
It's quite literally
that.
It is literally reprogramming yourself.
Plus, that came out back in November, and ingesting that streaming service.
You broke up there. I heard November and I heard streaming service.
Oh, Disney Plus.
Oh, what about
it?
Do
you guys have it? Have you guys got it? And
yeah,
what are your thoughts on it? And
let's see here. So Disney Plus, I think the only thing I've ever really watched on it is The Mandalorian. I watched a couple of documentaries on it, and my kids probably watch more on Disney Plus than I do. So far, I'm really excited. I'm excited about the Star Wars related stuff. So if they come up with the Obi-Wan off story, I'll watch all the Star Wars stuff that they come out on it.
Very cool. They've got a documentary series coming out for The Mandalorian. It comes out on May 4th. So,
yeah, I don't know that I'll watch the documentary on The Mandalorian, but I will watch the next episodes of The Mandalorian. I did watch the Walt Disney Story. So there's a documentary series on Walt Disney, and I like that just because, again, you walk into Orlando, Florida, or you walk into Disneyland in Anaheim, or you walk into any of the other things. I just like all of that stuff that is there was all in one man's mind named Walt Disney. And I love hearing his story. I love the idea of people who take a thought and then go and create something in this physical world that didn't exist before at the largest scale. I love that.
Him and Steve, probably the two biggest examples of that. That's pretty much all I question-wise. What would you like to share that we haven't covered, or the message you have for people?
Oh, you don't want to take me there unless you have a specific place, because let me tell you, I've got over 5,000 hours I've already shared of my life online. So there's about 5,000 hours worth of content that hasn't come out in this conversation yet, if you want to. But I think I'm happy with the things that have been here. The one thing I would just say is that if anything that I've shared has been valuable to you, if there's been any insight, anything that resonates with you, I'd encourage you to head over to mindsetanswerman.com/free and check out the opening keynote address that I did for Free the Dream 2018. It's a pretty powerful talk, and at the top of the page it says, "Give me 60 minutes and I'll teach you how to live the life of your dreams," or something like that, which is a pretty bold claim. But here's the deal: people that have gone through it, and it's been hundreds and hundreds. I think it's nearing 1,000 people who've signed up for the free version of that. And there's a question that comes out several hours after you sign up, and it asks, did you get what you promised? And I've received several hundred people's testimonies of how their life is going to be radically different based upon that 1 hour talk.
That's great. Well, thank you for this conversation. Like I said at the beginning, you've been a podcasting inspiration to me. I tried to start a few shows back in the day, but this is the one I landed with. I'm approaching 100, and I just wanted to thank you for that.
My pleasure, Dylan. It's been a pleasure. You've been in the community here for, I think, over 12 years now, and so
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Congratulations on continuing to pursue your own dreams, your creative projects and endeavors, and I wish you continued success.
Well, thank you, Cliff. Thanks for joining us, and everybody, we'll see you later. Thanks, Cliff.
Hey, my pleasure. Was that good?
That was good.
All righty. Well, I am going to get off here. I'm going to go take a little bit of a break, and Stephanie and I are going to do our accounting work for the month.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Oh, yeah. So much fun.
Ours is pretty easy this month since we haven't been bringing in a lot. A lot of mine is, what's the word? Well, I worked for a comedy club. It shut down. I was doing Instacart, and with the germs, we were just too nervous to do it. And then I was working for an event. So, it shut everything down. I also work for a college, and they're still paying me, but there's nothing to do since all the students moved online. So it's been a crazy journey. So
Yeah.
hopefully we get back to things soon. So, but I'm starting to figure this other stuff out, developing new.
Well, I know it's a tough time, and I just encourage you to keep asking yourself, what can I do today to make sure that if this thing continues, I can bring in income regardless of outside circumstances.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out. So, and talking with you has been inspirational, especially with the fitness stuff, knowing that 20-minute barrier.
Yeah, I didn't even get into the fact that there's another benefit, and that is the dopamine and the endorphins that you get from working out. It will unlock creativity inside of you that you'll never get to otherwise.
Wow. Great. Thank you. Appreciate that.
My pleasure.
All right. Well, I'll let you back to your day. I was going to switch back to bi-weekly in May, but I'm getting stuff lined up. So it may be like the second Monday of May for you.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right, man.
All right.
Have a great day.
All right. You too. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.